Wendy, is the live stream on? Yes. A pleasure in opening the council meeting of the 18th of June 2024 at 6 p.m. and welcome all those in attendance. The City of Vincent would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge that as a City of Vincent we have a role in working towards reconciliation and justice for First Nations people. I note that everybody is here, so we don't need any apologies, and there's obviously no one on a leave of absence. Can I please ask whether anyone who is in the council chamber would like to address the meeting? Yes. Okay. So just please come forward. Please say your name and the suburb that you're coming from, and if you're wanting to speak to one of the agenda items, just which one that is. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor Salmon and councillors. Leslie Flory, 79 Sass Ave, Mount Hawthorn. I have a 900mm stormwater pipe on my property, a major asset of City of Vincent. Despite numerous requests over a number of months for specific information, I now have CCTV footage from the 18th of December 23. This report from All Pipe Technologies titles a routine inspection. This does not mention any damage of the stormwater pipe on my property and includes only 3 general photographs. My initial request in March 23 was for the footage of each segment of pipe and its joints. City of Vincent confirmed this would be done, however, information provided to date says otherwise. Furthermore, the full length of this pipe is now concealed by a 34-metre UV lining. Total cost to the City of Vincent ratepayers was $63,000, including GST. Question: why has my pipe been singled out for the UV lining when there appears to be no significant damage? Question: please provide the scope of works for the UV lining of 79 Sass Ave, Mount Hawthorn, and a detailed City of Vincent report on the condition of my pipe, including the reason why the City of Vincent decided to single out the stormwater pipe on my property amongst the extensive stormwater pipe network. Question: how many kilometres of stormwater pipe exist within the City of Vincent? The City of Vincent Code of Conduct, Behaviour, Complaints and Management Policy. If a complaint is lodged against a City of Vincent employee, it states the principles of procedural fairness or natural justice will apply when dealing with a complaint under this policy. In particular, the respondent will be afforded a reasonable opportunity to be heard before any findings are made or a plan implemented. The decision maker should be objective and impartial, with an absence for bias or for the perception of bias, and any findings made will be based on a proper and genuine consideration of the evidence. Question: why is procedural fairness and natural justice afforded to the City of Vincent employees but not to a resident with a substantial complaint against the City of Vincent? Question: why has the City of Vincent not been transparent about the number of properties affected by the stormwater pipes running through ratepayers' properties? Previous vague responses indicated several properties, with the latest reply from government suggesting there could be more than 40 houses. Question: since the GHD report in 2022, how much has the City of Vincent spent up to the 18th of June 24 on the GHD drainage and technical memorandum report, consultants, contractors, mapping, relining and maintenance? This is a significant and costly endeavour, particularly given that the City of Vincent appears to lack comprehensive knowledge of its stormwater asset locations. Question: how much has been allocated in the upcoming budget for stormwater pipe mapping, consultation, contracts, reports, UV lining and maintenance? Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Would someone else like to address the meeting?
Okay. Hi, I'm Alison James. I'm from Mount Hawthorn. I'm here to speak about the 30-metre LED sign that's been erected above residential properties just at the base of the Lake Monger pedestrian bridge. It's affecting about 14 homes really directly, including our next door neighbours who have a billboard-sized LED towering above their house. And it's taken away our view of a beautiful pedestrian bridge, and now we're looking at commute times to the CBD. It also really affects the people who are using the pedestrian bridge to access Lake Monger. And I know in the City of Vincent, in your guidelines, you've been talking about public open space and how important that is. This is a part of that public open space. You guys have been doing an amazing job with the skate park that you've built there. You're slowing roads around that area. It's a really valuable part of our community, that bridge. And now as you're walking over the bridge, half of it is blocked with a giant metal, really claustrophobic looking sign. So you can't anymore see the traffic. You're literally walking behind a sign for half of the bridge. So I'm asking for support. I've met with John Carey, who is supportive. We've written to the minister, and we're doing a ministerial. Main Roads is doing a ministerial. Main Roads has admitted that they dropped the ball on this one. It's a real eyesore for the community, and I think it really detracts from so many things. In your strategic plan, you've talked about the effective asset management of reserves, more pedestrian-friendly areas, areas for quiet enjoyment and reflection, and this bridge does all of those things. Of course, it's not on actual City of Vincent land, it's on the freeway corridor, but that freeway has been widened and it's now right on top of a residential area. And so when in meeting with Main Roads, they said you're going to need to show support from the City of Vincent, really strong support. You're going to need to see strong support from John Carey, which I believe we have. And we've been getting a lot of media. I spoke with 9 News, and thank you, Mesmon, for speaking with them too. We've got a petition out at the moment where we've got almost 400 signatures showing community support. Hopefully we can get more of that support. But I do believe that this is a really important bridge because it connects the Britannia Reserve and that open space with Gallop Lake Monger. It has important significance to Aboriginal people. The Gallop Theatre experience starts at the base of that bridge and will now be starting under a giant LED sign. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate the support that's already gone into this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you for coming along to Council. Next.
Meyer Highgate. So the first item is 10.1, the street tree policy. There were 45 members of the community who used the Imagine Vincent website to put in their submissions, who asked to be informed when this was coming to council. There are 5 other people who put in email submissions, such as myself. The community engagement policy says participants, a strange word, but participants will be informed of meeting dates and providing as much time as possible. That was 6 weeks ago. No one has been informed, and I think you should actually suspend this till the next meeting and inform people, give them the chance. I'm also concerned about the way you're amending the policy. There's 3 different versions since it went out for community consultation. The last one changed in the last week, so I think that's councillor influence. If councillors want to change the policies, they should do it in this chamber, and preferably do it at the beginning before it goes out to public consultation. I support the stretch targets, which I think someone might move, but that should have gone out before it went out to consultation. Second one is the heritage policy. The community engagement policy may require submissions to be summarised. Well, what it actually says is the summary of submissions reports should provide sufficient context and detail to enable responses to be understood. Next sentence, submission can include verbatim if it deemed necessary. If it's done for the street tree policy, it's done for other policies. I can't see why it wasn't done for this policy. I think it's not very good practice that you get just a short summary of your submission and the reasoning you gave is not visible. So you just have to trust that the council, the staff have interpreted it properly. I don't. There was also a claim that the community funding policy establishes eligibility criteria, assessment and approval processes. It was such a pathetic little table. There's no detail that anyone could use. A community member couldn't look at that and say, oh, yes, I understand. A council staff member in 3 years' time couldn't look at that and say, yes, I understand. You need to have a proper policy in place. There's a claim that other local governments hand out $10,000 grants. Well, as I put in my email, you look at Subiaco, who's very mature in this area. They've got a very good local list. They have $5,000 grants. It's all done transparently. The property details, the submissions are put in the agenda and councillors determine it. It's not done by some staff member in the background. The last item is 10.2, the stormwater policy. I still maintain that the policy is misleading. It's going to mislead community members when it goes out. I think it's also technically flawed. But most importantly, it misses the opportunity to have a policy about city-owned land. The policy at the moment talks about residential and commercial. But what about the car parks? Vincent's car park at Beatty Park is putting water onto the oval and flooding people. Those people aren't here today because they're so fed up of having to deal with the council because there's no black and white guidance that tells them what is reasonable and what is not. I would have thought the staff were the ones who'd want this so that they can see what their targets are and they can argue to the community, no, that's going too far. This is what we're supposed to do. So you should include your own land in the policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dudley. Okay, so all the questions that have been asked today will be included in the next agenda, hopefully with the answers, and the items which have been identified will be first on the agenda. Okay, and your comments will also be recorded in the minutes. Right. Okay, there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:11. Okay, Governance Manager, could you please confirm if any written statements were received?
Confirming we received written statements from Dudley Byer of Highgate. A response to questions raised will be included in the agenda of the next council meeting.
Okay, any responses to previous public questions will be listed in the agenda. I have received one request for a leave of absence from Councillor Sophie Greer for the 11th of July to the 3rd of August. Is there a mover to this request? Moved Councillor Castle, sorry, and then seconded Councillor Hallett. Okay, all those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we haven't received any petitions, deputations or presentations. I ask that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 21st of May be confirmed. Do I have a move? That's moved by Councillor Wolf, seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. I do have some statements that I'd like to make. I note that since our last council meeting, there has been an increasing public concern about the rates of family and domestic violence that has been occurring, particularly here in Western Australia. And there's been some deeply distressing incidents that have occurred that has really brought this to the fore in terms of an issue of concern. I wanted to advise that the Ethnic Communities Council of WA is going to be doing some training with Lifeline WA, and that's free. It's almost fully subscribed, so I'm not saying this for the purposes of promotion, but what that has meant is that the City of Vincent is now looking to partner with Lifeline to deliver this free training for people within our community as well who may be interested. It is really good training. As we know, Lifeline is a highly credible organisation and very skilled around issues of delivery of training, and it covers things like knowing how to identify the different signs and forms of abuse that constitute family and domestic violence, learning about the cycle of violence, and reflecting on what you might be able to do if you are either experiencing family and domestic violence yourself or know of someone who may be experiencing family and domestic violence. And so it's importantly going to provide people an opportunity to look at ways to actually assist and also points of referral. I think it's a really important piece of training for us to be delivering as a council when we are fronted with these massive societal issues. One of the questions that you always want to ask when you are in government is, what can you possibly do? And I think this is something that practically Vincent can do to try to play its part in terms of being part of the solution. Likewise, I note that last week we ran at the City of Vincent community workshops in conjunction with Advocare around elder abuse, and that's a really important issue to raise awareness of, for people to be aware of the many ways in which that presents itself and ways to actually assist people to either reach out for support if they feel that they are being subject to it, or to support people who, if you are concerned that someone may be subject to elder abuse. But I thought that I would also make some comments about this issue that's just emerged over the last week about the issue of main roads and the way that they've rolled out the smart freeways signage. I know that all councillors, including myself, have received correspondence from very distressed residents who pretty much overnight have discovered that they've got these large 30-metre long neon signs that are shining into their backyards, not something that they ever knew was coming, and it is proving to be extraordinarily distressing for those families and very disruptive to people's lives. I just want to confirm that the City of Vincent was not advised that this was going to be happening, and is not supportive of the location of these current signs. And certainly I'm myself, and I know the administration, and I imagine the people here are very supportive of efforts to try to get these signs relocated. I think it's fair to say Main Roads dropped the ball on this one, but I suppose I'm getting a little bit tired of that, to be perfectly honest. The reality is that community consultation should have been the first thing that was looked at, and it would have been nice for someone to have come and spoken to the council and said, look, can we get your advice about where these could possibly go? The council does have ideas about where the signs could have gone where it would not have proven to be disruptive to residents and have the impact that it is now having on people. And I think this flows in a little bit to what I was saying at the last council meeting as well, my concerns about the way that Main Roads handle the black spot funding, in that they effectively just present a lump of funding and say, we're going to do this corner, and you either need to do it now or you're not going to get the money. And we're saying we need precinct planning, and we can't just have this sort of ad hoc approach. So I'm hoping that we can have some conversations with Main Roads about perhaps better ways to communicate with local councils and to work with local councils, and different ways of approaching. And in this instance, I hope that they certainly recognise that they didn't just drop the ball, they actually totally stuffed up, and that they're going to have to use taxpayer money to try to fix the issue that they've got, because that they've caused. Because I can tell you now, if I was living in one of those houses and I had that massive neon sign permanently flashing into my backyard, well, I reckon, frankly, the residents affected by this are showing a lot more tolerance than I would, which would be very little, in fact, none. So, yes, I wanted people to be assured that this is not something that has happened because the City of Vincent has been part of the problem. Okay. Declarations of interest. Acting CEO, do you have any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a declaration of interest from Councillor Ashley Wallace, who has declared a financial interest in item 9.1, outcome of advertising, review of heritage management policies. The extent of his interest is that his home is on the municipal heritage inventory.
Okay, so items which have been the subject of a question, comment or deputation from the members of public are 10.1 first, then 9.1 and 10.2. In terms of items which require an absolute majority decision, that's 11.4 and 12.2. Okay, so Councillor Warner, are there any additional items that you wish to discuss? Councillor Wallace, Councillor LaFontaine, Councillor Castle, Councillor Greer, Councillor Alexander, Councillor Wolf.
Sorry, 9.2, please.
And Councillor Hallett. Okay, so I had, in addition to that, 11.1. That's already on there, and no, they're both majority ones. So in addition to those ones and the majority ones, I had 11.1. Okay, I'll just work out the order that we're going to do it in. So you're ready now.
Confirming the following items will be moved on block: 9.3, 11.2, 11.3, 12.1 and 12.3.
Okay, so do we have a mover that those items are moved on block? Okay, moved Councillor Warner and seconded Councillor LaFontaine. So all those in favour? Okay, that's passed by consensus. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I'm going to go to item 10.1, outcome of advertising and adoption of street tree policy. Do I have a mover for this? Moved Councillor Wallace. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Wolf. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. This has been well workshopped already. I guess just wanted to follow up on a question from Mr. Meyer about whether community engagement respondents were informed, and if not, why not, of this item appearing on the agenda.
Through you, Mayor Zamon, if that's okay, I can take this question. The Imagine Vincent website submissions were notified on Wednesday, June the 5th, as well as Tuesday, May the 7th, prior to both council meetings. Unfortunately, it was an administrative error and the email submission were omitted as part of this process.
Okay, thank you. Clause 3, item 4 says that watering will be undertaken according to an assessment of priorities. I just wondered what those priorities were and how they'd be prioritised.
Those priorities would be determined, I guess, on the success of the watering. So, for instance, if a tree, depending on the location, such as we've discussed, some are more feasible than others. In addition, there's been discussion in the team where with the upcoming underground power, that's subject to resources, we would prioritise mature trees that are not located under power lines.
Okay, thank you. Apologies to everyone for the very late notice on this, admin, community, councillors alike. I do have an amendment that I'd like to propose for this item. I guess I'm still concerned that we're not doing enough to assess watering requirements of trees that are at risk due to the extent, for example, the extensive drought that we just had, and undertaking watering where required on those. I think Wendy's prepared some text on that. Actually, do you want to go to the second to first statement?
Yes, I was just going to
Getting a little
suggest
carried
it.
away.
Thank you. So, Councillor Wallace, okay, Councillor Wallace has noted that he has a proposed amendment. Councillor Wolf, is there any comments that you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess noting that conversation, just a few broad comments. Firstly, as per last month, just to thank all of the residents who are extremely engaged in this process. It's really heartening to see how important our street trees are to our residents, and we really appreciate the input. I think deferring this item last month was the right approach because it allowed us to come together and really workshop this item further. We did go through the policy line by line by line by line in great detail and really consider all of the ideas from councillors and from the community. Acknowledging that there are numerous suggestions from the community that won't have made it into the final version of the policy, but just to say that that's certainly not the end of the conversation around our approach to protecting and managing our street trees. Particularly, I note we've got a new tree canopy advocates group in Vincent, and it's certainly not the end of that discussion. I think lastly, just looking forward, it's been very clear from this process that this is an important issue to the community, and the community has very high expectations around Vincent being a progressive council doing a lot to protect our street trees. So for the next round of review for this policy, I would really suggest starting really early and engaging the community through workshops so that we can consider this thoroughly moving forward. That's all. Thanks.
Now, would anyone else like to speak to this policy? Okay, I'm going to refer back to you, Councillor Wallace. You have an amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. Yeah, I provided the text via email. Wendy may be able to bring it up. The thrust of it is to just reinforce the work that the city will do, should do, I hope will do, to assess tree health and undertake watering where required. I understand we've got 15,000 plus trees in Vincent. I don't expect this to be required for anything approaching a majority of those. Maybe it'll be limited to a few hundred. I do acknowledge that it will create some additional work on the city's behalf, but I think that's worthwhile compared to losing them, replacing them, and having to undertake watering anyway. So what I'm doing is suggesting a change to clause 8, which discusses the tree register, which is a fantastic tool that we have to add watering requirements as a new criteria that we collect and store data on, and some wording around when the register will be reviewed and updated. A previous amendment I put forward included the word immediately. I've taken admin's feedback on that, that's too onerous, and just removed it. But yeah, it should be updated following the removal or planting of a street tree, pruning, and updated during summer to reassess health and watering requirements. And then the addition of a new section 9, street tree watering, for kind of builds on the work within the register and introduces some criteria around when and how the city should undertake street tree watering. Need me to read it in full?
Okay, so what we're going to do, because we haven't had a chance to get it in front of us, is we're just going to get copies to put in front, or let us have a chance to check it properly, and then I'll call for a seconder. Okay, so are you going to get an opportunity to give it to people in the council, or are we needing to look over the shoulder or look onto the computer? We're getting copies. Okay, so we're getting copies that are going to be coming through. So would anyone like to dance while we're waiting?
Maybe the manager would like to respond.
Well, I was going to get a seconder and then get a response. So in the meantime, we
Very keen on getting that.
We can do the elm dance if you want. Does anyone else know what that is? Okay. It's an old forest blockade thing that we used to do. Anywho's, okay. That's coming in a moment. For a moment of silent reflection. I will ask though, does anyone feel confident that they have seen it sufficiently to give us to second it at this point? Okay, seconded, Councillor Castle. Thank you very much. So in that case, while it's being distributed, I might ask for a response from management, if that's okay.
Through you, Mayor Zaman. I guess while I completely agree with this amendment in principle, it does have, and this is some information that I've relayed to council previously, it does have resource implications for our team. And I have concerns with those being captured within a policy document, particularly with Clause 8 watering requirements. To retrospectively add those to 16,000 plus trees would be quite a costly exercise. That's not one of the criteria that we originally included in our tree mapping, noting that our original tree mapping was exclusively contracted out through an arborist. So I have concerns with that. Whilst I appreciate the sentiment, that does have implications for budget and my team. Regarding the additional 8.2, I very much appreciate the removal of immediate, and I don't foresee any issues with that, aside from the last point being annually during summer. Again, to go through and do a reassessment of 16,000 trees is something that we're looking at how we're going to tackle in our team, but it's certainly not going to be an annual exercise due to costs. It'll probably be a rolling every 3 years. And street tree watering, again, the last point, it just needs to be understood that has financial implications, and it needs to be considered whether these implications sit best within policy or other strategic documents.
Okay, we still haven't got the papers yet, but does anyone else want to make any comments in relation to the substance of the amendment at this point? I've already got a second. We'll just one. Okay, Councillor Wallace, please, you feel free to comment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you to the manager for that feedback. Yeah, I appreciate it. Potentially a lot of work. I guess my intent, or the way I thought this might be interpreted, is that the watering requirement is by exception only. So I guess based on the numbers that were presented around the number of trees that had died this past summer, I guess that there's a few hundred trees that may require watering to prevent that happening in the future. So, you know, we're not talking about a full arboreal assessment. I'd imagine it could probably be done by the most part through a car window. So I do have to defer to your advice on that to some extent, but I don't anticipate it to be a particularly massive workload. With respect to budget implications for watering, I guess if we don't water and we allow them to die, we'll be in the position of replacing them and then undertaking watering anyway. So in my view, it's just bringing those costs forwards to some extent, and excluding the cost of a replacement tree, and maintaining canopy coverage as we do that, rather than starting from scratch with a new tree. So I appreciate it. It would cost some money, but I think that cost would be incurred anyway were the tree to die.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Wallace. I think I'm supportive of this amendment. I do have a question around the retrospective application of this new column in the register of watering requirements, and because I certainly didn't read it as requiring administration to go back and fill in all the 16,000 that are already on the register, but that going forward, this would be one of the factors captured. And I'm just wanting some guidance from administration about whether that can be an interpretation of the way it's currently worded, or whether we could perhaps tweak it slightly to reflect Councillor Wallace's intention and perhaps council's intention.
Through
Okay,
you.
do you?
Oh, apologies. Would you like me to speak to that?
Yes, please.
Through you, Mayor Zamon. I think, yeah. So essentially, the way it works is when we went out to RFQ, there's like a list of criteria that we want information on each tree. Maintenance requirements, or like such as immediate pruning, you know, high, medium, low priority was included. I would need to probably get further guidance as to whether the software has a specific or would support the addition of a specific watering requirement section. I do believe we could maybe reword it to be captured under a broader maintenance requirements, and then in brackets possibly watering. I haven't had much time to think about it, apologies, but whether watering is required. However, it needs to be understood that the register is to some degree relatively static, and a watering requirements is something that will pop up. So if we had our trees assessed 3 months ago in winter, they could look fine, and then 4 months later they could be suffering from heat stress. So that's why I struggle with including a watering requirement in our overall tree register, because it's a moving part, if that makes sense. I hope so. So that's where, yeah, that's where I sit with the specifically including watering requirements into the criteria of our register.
Okay, Councillor Castle, you look like you're still wanting to ask questions.
I'm not sure if it's a question or if I'm just going to comment. I think my understanding of the intention of this amendment is so that we are better informed in order to allocate resources, including budget, to the maintenance of our trees across the city. And I am in support of that. I think that having this extra level of information means that we can manage those budgetary requirements. Yes, there's more work in the short term, but I think that pays off in the longer term by both allowing us to make plans for watering, but also to hopefully avoid some of the more dire consequences that we are seeing. I suppose I do sympathise with the comments that about whether this belongs in the policy or in a lower hierarchy document. But I think that ultimately where I land is I'm supportive of us giving this the priority that it needs by including it in the policy document and indicating that this is critical information for us to hold as an organisation to manage our resources. Acknowledging that has resourcing and budget implications, and that's something that we're ultimately responsible for in how we allocate the budget. So I suppose where I land is I'm supportive of the amendment.
Okay, are there any other comments in relation to this proposed amendment? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zamon, and thank you, Councillor Wallace, for putting forward this amendment. I very much agree with the sentiment around prevention of our mature trees is the top priority, and very much here the cost of replacement trees. I agree that getting the additional information is of a great benefit, so we can allocate those resources. My question is around for administration, where we will request watering by associated lot owner or representative. Is that we've spoken a lot today about how much our community love our street trees and value our street trees. I think people don't want to see their street trees die, but would this be the first time we've put in writing a commitment that the community would water the street trees off their own back? And any comments on that?
Through you, Mayor Zamon, we do encourage residents to water their own trees, particularly when we're doing new tree planting, and we inform the residents via info bulletin. There's always a piece in there that we do water for the first year or two to establish but encourage additional watering. In addition, when we get street tree requests or for inspection and the tree is suffering from heat stress, my team will talk to the resident and suggest that they assist through additional tree watering.
Okay, excellent. So at the moment, it's more of a suggest and educate rather than a formalised request. You would water that. You know, the city is requesting you water the tree. I'm just wondering if there's a preference there for suggest or educate the importance of rather than a preference for request.
Through you, Mayor Zamon, my preference would be to suggest and educate. Because they are a city's asset, and whilst we can request watering, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will comply. So I think it's more important to educate them and encourage them to assist, and some more, how do you say, sensitive and positive wording around that might be better than request.
Okay, are there any further comments? So I'm sorry, I did see some nods from the mover of the amendment. Are you happy to accept an amendment to your amendment?
Yeah, if that's okay with the governance manager, and thanks to Councillor Greer, I think that was more in line with my intent, so it's a good change.
So we just need to clearly state what the change is. So in that, because that's accepted by you. So where it says 9 street tree watering, I'm trying to, yeah, we're trying to get it up on the screen. So where it's 9, the second dot point, instead of say request, the wording would be suggest. Well, I mean, I think it's a matter of simply saying, in the instance of veg trees, suggest watering by the associated lot owner or representative. Encourage. How about encourage? That is a nice positive. It's very encouraging. Okay, so in the instance of veg tree, sorry, what was that? Okay, encourage watering by the associated lot owner or representative, and where the tree is deemed unfeasible to water due to surrounding conditions, implement changes to facilitate watering, including but not limited to. No, that's pretty much the only bit, isn't it? All right, so that's the only bit. So where it says, so all you're doing is changing request to encourage watering, which means that, of course, people are able to refuse if they don't have the money to pay for the extra water, or they don't want to pay for extra water. But it means that that's an option that can be put to people. And can I suggest that, considering how we ran out of our groundwater allocation because of the extensive dry, and of course we're not able to get more because the Gnangara Mound is already under huge pressure, it is going to be the case that scheme water is likely to have to be utilised in future for those sorts of things. Okay, so that's the amendment that's been put. I'd like to make some comments about the actual amendment as well. I concur with the view that if this amendment will likely require additional resourcing, and I think that it's really important that we do that as a council, that we send a very clear message that we think that this is an area of our activity that requires more assistance. Our street trees are really important to our residents, and it's really important policy, which is why we've really taken our time on this one. And so I'm not concerned that it actually means more resourcing will be allocated to our trees. I think it's necessary. So I'm supportive of that. I also don't have the concerns that have been shared that the amendment as written will mean that you need to go back through the database to add 16,000 new entries. I don't think there's an expectation from council that occurred, and I don't believe that that's actually within the scope of the amendment that's been moved. I did like the suggestion by the manager of this area that a number of threats could potentially be identified. So it's not, so watering is one of those issues, but of course it could be risk around pest or dieback or all sorts, or any manner of things that might actually identify that a tree is needing additional assistance or is at risk. Okay, so if Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Yeah, just a question in relation to the resourcing, probably more for another manager, but we're also adopting the budget tonight, assuming it gets voted up. What would be the timeline for, I guess, projecting what additional resources would be required for the manager of parks to respond to this? And what's the timeline for reviews of the annual budget to actually embed that and get approval?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, essentially we would deal with it at the mid-year budget review, which would be around February, March next year.
Around about the time that everything is drying. Okay. Are there any further questions in relation to this amendment? Okay, I'm going to put the amendment, it's the amended amendment that's in front of us now. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Okay, so now we'll go back to the substantive proposal with the amendment incorporated. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak about the substantive proposal? Substantive amended proposal. Okay, mover, Councillor Wallace, did you want to say anything? All right, then I will put the proposal. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously because Vincent loves its trees. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 9.1, outcome of advertising, review of heritage management policies. Do I have a mover for this proposal? So that's moved Councillor Castle. Is there a seconder? Oh, and noting, of course, that Councillor Wallace is leaving because the room because of conflict. Seconded, Councillor Alexander.
No, I don't know what my house is listed at. Our house is listed as, but it could be heritage listed, I think.
Well, the answer is so we don't know. Well, not necessarily. You don't know, and we don't know. So
I suspect it is listed. So
essentially, the rule around understanding, you need to understand if you have an interest and whether that interest would influence your decision making. So if you're not aware that you have, it's registered, so you have to need to consider whether that would influence your decision making. So yeah.
So, Councillor Alexander, you would like to declare an interest in relation to your very lovely house, and okay, so we note that, and we note that Councillor Alexander is leaving the room. Okay, so going back to the proposal in front of us, we've got mover. That's Councillor Castle. Do we have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Warner. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Those of us left in our new houses. I have some questions and concerns relating to the questions asked last week. In particular, the question around the heritage assistance policy. I suppose maybe I don't have questions. I'm really not comfortable with where we would sit policy-wise if we revoked the Heritage Assistance Fund policy and left only the community funding policy to guide this decisions in this matter. I don't believe that policy provides enough guidance. It refers directly to what will be a revoked policy. And given that the intention is not to review that until 2025, I'm not sure when in 2025, I don't feel that it's prudent to revoke that policy at this point until we can also consider it in the context of the community funding policy. The other concern that I have is the rationale for reducing the fund or the cap to $5,000 simply because it fits with that policy that is yet to be reviewed. I would rather we approach that in a more fulsome way and review both at the same time. I'm very happy for others to speak and give their thoughts, but I suppose I'll foreshadow a procedural motion to defer.
Councillor Warner, do you have any comments?
Just briefly, just to say I'm in favour of this. Our strategic community plan identifies that our community is in favour of us supporting and assisting preserving our heritage values here, and I'd much rather pursue what our SCP says rather than just random members of the community. So thank you very much.
Okay, does anyone else want to speak on this proposal? Okay, Councillor Carsey, you've indicated you have a procedural motion.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to move a procedural motion to defer this item. I'd ask for some guidance from administration around timing. The basis for that is in order to consider the community funding policy at the same time. So would that be possible to be brought forward for next month, or would you need longer to consider that?
Mayor Zaman. Our advice is that it wouldn't be possible to bring forward the community funding policy review to next month or more imminently. It's scheduled in 2025 because we need to balance with all other competing priorities of workload, so that would be maintained. For the time being, just a comment in terms of the $5,000, that is already enshrined in the community funding policy. Okay, so that would remain as is. We wouldn't be seeking to change that as part of any deferral that may be resolved by council tonight.
I suppose before the motion is actually moved and seconded, I have a question about whether would it cause any issues if what we simply sought to do, instead of deferring the entire item, was to amend the motion, the proposal, to delete 2.2, which revokes policy 7.6.9, so as to not hold up the rest of the item.
Mayor Zaman, that's an option. That wouldn't create an issue with the remainder of council's resolution that's been recommended, and that's before you. So there wouldn't be any issues from administration's perspective with that approach.
Thank you. Procedural question then. Is it possible to defer a portion of the item, or is the better option to just remove it, with the understanding obviously that council administration will bring it back before council in due course? Just from a procedural point of view, what would be the better path?
Through the chair, I suggest that you amend the recommendation to state that you want to proceed with the various ones, but do not support proceeding with that specific policy, and word it such that it says council does not support the amendments proposed to policy, I'm not sure which specific one it is, and request that administration present this to a future council meeting for consideration.
Okay, I think I could. All right, I might need some wording advice, but I think what I would propose in my amendment, if I can have a seconder, is to delete clause 2.2, to add clause 3, requests, what was the word used? Administration provide a report to council on the revocation of policy number 7.6.9.
I think it would be best to have at point 3 that council does not support the revocation of policy 7.6.9 as worded at 2.2, and then includes and requests that administration presents a report to council, insert timeframe. So it's making it very clear that you're making a decision not to support the policy as tabled.
But we would still need to delete 2.2? Yes.
Correct.
Yes, okay. I'm happy with that. Wendy might need some advice on that to get that wording right. So the amendment would be to delete clause 2.2 and add clause 3, requests administration to provide a report to council. Oh, sorry, what did you, sorry, I missed the bit about does not support. Does not support the revocation of policy number 7.6.9 Heritage Assistance Fund, included as attachment 9, and requests administration provide a report to council in timeframe to be suggested by administration. Well, I suppose the question is how soon can that community funding policy come back to council? And whenever that is, tie it to that.
Perhaps so to be clear, that policy is due for review in 2025 and is managed by a team, not the authors of this report. So we wouldn't be able to commit to anything prior to that current date at this meeting.
Okay, so it sounds as though it's unspecified date. I know. Okay, but needing to make it very clear that there's a strong desire to have this looked at sooner rather than later and in conjunction with that other policy. I have there's a suggestion that's been put forward.
You can insert a date, perhaps March 2025, and it may be before that, or if it gets to that point and the other team isn't able to have progressed the review of that policy that's linked to this one, then we can report to council at that point.
How about December 2024?
Mayor Zaman, or the alternate is that it could say, just to add on to the end of that paragraph there, to insert the words as part of the community funding policy review by no later than 2025 calendar year.
I suppose that really reflects how eager you are to revoke that policy.
Just checking, is that the wording that you're proposing, Councillor Castle?
Well, it's really just about the date.
It's your. Can I say it's your proposal? You get to. I still need a seconder.
Yes, I might not even have a seconder.
This is true.
I just don't want to propose something that's unreasonable for administration, but I also don't want to put too long a time frame on it. Is December 2024 unreasonable, I guess, is my question.
Well, can we please put December, how about it puts December 2024, and as per the suggestion of the governance manager, if it turns out that that's not possible, then an update can be given at that point.
Yeah,
but it gives an indication of of the priority that council wants on this.
Yes. So yes, I'm happy for that to be my amendment if someone.
Okay, so Councillor Castle has proposed that amendment. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded, Councillor Greer. Is there anything that anyone wants to speak to on this amendment? Okay, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're back to the substantive motion. Does anyone else want to speak to the substantive amended motion? Okay, Councillor Castle, did you want to conclude your remarks? Okay, so all those, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Does someone want to ask Councillor Alexander and Councillor Wallace to come back in the room? Those two who have their lovely heritage houses. I mean, I like my house, but it's a 90s build. Can I just advise Councillor Alexander that in the time that you've been absent from the room, we have determined that indeed your house is on the Heritage Register. So apparently it is. So can I just say, good call, Councillor Alexander. Your instinct was right. Okay, so there you go. All right then, so now we'll move on to the next item, which is number 3, advertising of amended policy, stormwater drainage connections. Okay, do I have a mover for this proposal? Moved, Councillor Wallace. Do I have a seconder? Okay, I'll second it. Seconded me. Sorry. So if no one else is going to, so Councillor Wallace, would you like to speak to this proposal?
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. Apologies for missing the briefing last week. I do have a briefing-esque list of questions I'm hoping to work through with admin. First, it's not formatting, so the track changes don't show changes from the existing policy to the new policy, or just what do they show?
Through the chair, it shows the changes proposed. So the existing policy is dated back in 2013. The changes that's in red is the proposed changes that we want council to consider to go out for consultation.
So the struck through text is the text from the 2013 policy.
Through the chair, the struck through text is the iterations that staff were going through to make the changes on what is the current iteration of the policy for consultation.
Okay. Do we, I guess there's a broader question around policy review and presentation there. And maybe it was, yeah, does the acting CEO have a comment on the best way to present that info to council? Because I guess I'm of the view of Mr. Meyer that the track changes would be beneficial to show changes from existing policy to new rather than changes from drafts from the new policy only.
Thanks. Through the chair, yes, we'll do a review in respect to our policy development guidelines for staff and make those consistent and ensure that those have been adhered to in future iterations of policy review, just so we're all on the same page in respect to how we deal with community consultation, how we record it and respond to it, and also how we deal with track change documents in that space.
Okay, thank you. Onto the policy itself. So for the related documents, I was wondering if it's worth referring to the Swan and Canning Rivers Management Act and associated regulations. I think most of the city is within the catchment for the Swan Canning, and there is guidance within that or requirements within that for stormwater management.
Through the chair, take your comment on board. I would give advice to council that this is a stormwater drainage connection policy to deal with external third parties wanting to connect into the drainage system that the city owns and maintains.
Okay, thanks. I guess I'd note we do, it's the Act and regs do deal with stormwater quality, which is an item covered by this policy, so there may be some interaction there. when I was digging around this, I noted that there's a development control area associated with that act that takes in a lot of the eastern parts of Mount Lawley and East Perth. And I was wondering if, first of all, if that should also be referred to and if there's any additional requirements on that need to be reflected in the policy. And then there's a second question for the planning team, which said, the guidance from DBCA said DBCA has planning and development authority over the DCA, which includes private property under the Swan Canning Rivers Management Act. And so, yeah, second part of the question is, do we have to refer to DBCA for DAs in that area, and are they the determining body, which this comment seemed to imply?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, I'll deal with the planning query. Just to be clear that this policy, if adopted by council, is a council policy. It's not a local planning policy, so it's not an instrument intended to function to be given due regard when you're considering a development application. They're local planning policies, as well as a suite of planning regulations, and the act that you're referring to will still apply as part of a development assessment process. So all of those things still stand. This is separate and distinct. It is a council policy and a position on a city's asset in terms of infrastructure and how we deal with those things moving forward. Okay, so all of those considerations are relevant, but it's under a different head of power, and you'd consider that through the planning assessment process. I'll just add that council does have an adopted policy around all development in the district, the built form policy, and within that it has a distinct section that deals with water management and the principle around stormwater containment on site. That sets the consideration when you're assessing planning proposals, and then this would be separate in terms of maintenance and ongoing management of city infrastructure. Hope that provides clarity in terms of how it does or doesn't intersect with the planning framework.
Yeah, it does. I thank you for that information. I do appreciate the distinction. My question to planning was more just a curiosity for my own information. But just following up on that, do we refer DAs that occur within the development control area under that Act to DBCA for comment or even for determination, which seems to be implied by their website?
Through Mayor Zaman, there are referral requirements. So if there is a trigger under that head of power, then that is something that we would do as part of our referral process. But we did work through what those criteria and triggers are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you just take that one on notice about whether the DCA needs to be referred to specifically in that policy, because I imagine it may have further criteria around water quality and discharge. The question was, what's the intent of splitting residential and commercial industrial and applying different criteria to those?
Chair, we find that industrial commercial developments are quite large, a lot more opportunity to design to a higher flood or storm event. When you have residential lots, they're a lot smaller and can be managed with a much smaller requirements in regards to, you know, it might be one or two soak wells in a residential lot, but we're talking about sustainable urban drainage systems, quite large ones in regards to commercial and industrial builds, and that's where you would design to an increased storm and flood event in that respect.
Okay, I guess I view there's kind of like some overlap in terms of stormwater management between what might get considered commercial industrial and a large multi-res development. Do you have a view on whether we'd need to separate out kind of single dwelling developments at that kind of scale and potentially include large multi-res in this higher requirement? Was that a consideration? Is that worthwhile?
Through the chair, it's a good comment you make. I suppose when you're looking holistically at the DA process and BA approval space, this policy focuses on connecting into our drainage stormwater system. So the current policy does deal with, I suppose, the risk in regards to industrial commercial has a lot more risk in that respect, and residential would be a lower risk, and that's where the ARI stormwater flood and catchment areas come into that consideration.
Okay. Moving on, I was wondering if the policy is kind of in conflict with itself a little bit. Item 1 says to retain everything on site, and then item 2 goes on to say just retain 1 in 20, and then we might consider a connection afterwards. So I was wondering if admin would think it'd be worthwhile to potentially reword that so that it doesn't, well, yeah, so that there's a little bit more consistency between those items.
Through the chair. So when we go through the development application process and the building approvals, our focus is to retain all the stormwater that can be retained on site. Sometimes in regards to geotechnical reports, if infiltration and sustainable urban drainage designs can't be met, we would look into connections. Again, groundwater will be another consideration when we would do that. And if that is warranted and approved, we would try to design to the same criteria within the policy in regards to the storm events.
Okay, thank you. So condition 9, I can recognise and support the intent of that relating to no pollution to be transferred to the city's drainage network. Just wondering about the practicality of enforcing that. I guess all stormwater or water has levels of things you call contaminants that once they reach a certain threshold might be considered pollution. So I was wondering if admin would see value in replacing no pollution with reference to an established criteria for water quality. Given that we're in the Swan Canning catchment, there might be some guidance in the Act or regs or something like the ANZAC and ARMCAN's freshwater protection criteria might be appropriate as well. I guess I have a concern if we say zero, zero turbidity, zero metals, that kind of stuff, that's not feasibly achievable even with, very expensive treatment systems.
Through the chair, that could be a consideration. I suppose that the function of the policy is to highlight that if administration are going through connecting into our stormwater system, we would look into the pollutants, and we would strive to have no pollutants within our stormwater system. So be it that would be some negotiations or work to be done with the developer at that stage to potentially put in a gross pollutant trap or other means to treat that stormwater before it gets to the discharge point, wherever that may be.
Okay, thanks. I had a question around, so retaining a 1 in 100 event on any lot, I think can be extremely difficult to achieve. Has this kind of been tested anywhere? Have we, I guess, discussed with developers or people who this might be applied to around the feasibility of achieving this?
Through the chair, yes, we have. This week we were talking to one of the developers on that. Some of that lot was able to retain the 1 in 100 year requirement. I suppose when we look into our own drainage system and try to factor in climate change, that is the best practice that we're trying to achieve. Again, going through the development process, geo and groundwater restrictions or challenges, for a better word, and can work with the developers to come up with a solution that meets the development and is best for the city as well.
Okay, thank you. Again, I appreciate it's not the intent of this policy, but there was some discussion tonight around the city's views on stormwater management on its own property. Mr. Meyer submitted that there was an OMC agenda from, a new AGM agenda item from 2022 where council requested city define its responsibilities around stormwater management at public open spaces and other city operated areas. Has there been any progress on that?
Through the chair, yes, there has been progress, and I think it was in December of 2022 we came back to council with a plan to move forward in that space. So just an update for council, we have done a lot of drainage pickup on the Mount Hawthorn catchment area. So we've done that data collection. We've ran some hydraulic modelling to inform some designs, and we've just since completed a drainage project on Linton Street, which is using sustainable urban drainage techniques to infiltrate some of that flooding into that park area. So that's completed. We've been working with the town of Cambridge in regards to the Lake Munga outlet, and the modelling showed there was a blockage in the system. We were able to go to the town of Cambridge and unblock that, and I suppose improve the maintenance around the outlet within Lake Munga. And we're currently doing some hydraulic modelling upstream in the Mount Hawthorn catchment area. We've also did some works in William Street, so there was flooding in William Street. We put some measures in place, and touch wood, they seem to be working quite well. So we don't expect too much flooding in that area moving forward. And the focus with the 200 hotspot areas, we've mapped them. We've had a report done internally on the way forward. So that's underway, and we're continually addressing them as we speak. And also we've identified a number of houses that have piped infrastructure running through properties. We're assessing them case by case, and we started relining some of them, which are high priority, and started to map out a 4-year plan on potential other relining of infrastructure that runs in property throughout the city of Vincent. So there's been a lot of work in that space, and further work to be done in years to come.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate we're doing a heap of practical work in this space, and it's much more that still needs to be done. I guess I'm just wondering if, I guess the principles that are guiding that work, well, what they are to begin with, and I guess I'm of a view that they should be in a public-facing document like a policy. Is there an intent to create a policy that states something like the city will retain a 1 in 100 on POS, where we won't flood private residences, this kind of thing?
If I can address that through the chair. There is intent to have strategic documents that then will flow through into policy documents in respect to the drainage infrastructure and how we manage it. Understanding that our drainage infrastructure is influenced by not only the city connecting into it, we have various private properties connecting into it, we have main roads connecting into it, we have water corporation involved in it, and we have other local governments connecting into it as well, and we connect into other local governments systems. So it's not a standalone system, it is one part of a large system. The city's been advocating to the state government, initially Water Corp, but also looking to work through the Perth Inner City Councils group about seeking state government support in doing essentially a version of char mapping, or all the local coastal governments have had to do a coastal risk and management adaptation plan in how they're going to deal with a 1 metre in 100-year sea level rise. That 1 metre in 100-year sea level rise will impact the Swan and Canning estuarine systems. And as you've identified, stormwater drainage, much of it does flow into that system, and I'm fairly confident to say the drainage system will be ineffective should we have a 1 metre sea level rise. So we are looking at trying to get a state commitment towards funding the investigation into char mapping in the inner city area and that catchment in a larger piece. That would then drive some of the conversation around the likely life and effectiveness of the drainage system and what things that we need to do in trying to manage stormwater runoff on our properties, whether that would be upgrading the stormwater system or that we have to do other interventions such as re-infiltration in the city to manage that. So there's a big piece that needs to drive that. The city isn't and hasn't got the resources or the technical capability of doing that bigger piece. It needs to be a piece that's done with all those stakeholders working together because we're all impacted by it. So in short, it's a big piece at work. The studies that we're advocating for will drive the conversation about how we manage stormwater drainage in the future, how we address infrastructure, and how we can mitigate flooding in the future as well in residential areas. But we can't categorically say that we will do something that will not impact flooding in residential streets, because another local government could do something that exacerbates flooding in a residential street and we have no influence over it. Just like that we're aware that Lake Munga has been kept artificially high by about up to a metre, which then influences our ability to drain into it, and that we have to work with other authorities to try to get that water level reduced so our drainage system will work effectively. That means that we need to work with Town of Cambridge. We need to work with DBC in respect to the environmental issues that that reduction in water flow would have. So it's a challenging piece. Yes, we want to have policies in place, but those policies need to be informed by the bigger piece.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I agree with that to an extent. I think, yeah, I think it would still be good. You know, like we're obviously undertaking a lot of. I appreciate it's a cross LGA issue. Climate change is another issue. All of these kind of things. But I guess when we're undertaking works to improve our drainage network, that's designed with a goal in mind. So, you know, whether that's to transmit a 1 in 100 or a 1 in 10. So those principles exist that are driving the work that we're already doing. I guess I'd see value in just making those public facing and like acknowledge that we may be many years and many millions of dollars away from achieving the objectives of that policy, but just having something that, you know, everybody in the community can know what we're working to, acknowledging the shortcomings in the existing network would be useful. Because we're getting off topic from the actual agenda item, I will review some policies in the background and potentially request a workshop item around it.
Through the chair, we are developing the enhanced environment strategy. Our management of drainage, stormwater drainage sits comfortably under that, and I'm very comfortable for that to be a piece sitting in that strategy, and that actions then drive through from that strategy on how we manage stormwater drainage.
No further questions, thank you.
Okay, so would anyone else like to comment on this proposal? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zamon. And just before this goes to community consultation, I think from the heading and people's deep interest in stormwater, people will read it and go, oh, this is about the stormwater that's bumming up out of my storm near my house. I was wondering if there was scope in the purpose or another section to outline what this document is not for the community, so that it's really clear that this is a part of the puzzle. This is not a comprehensive approach to stormwater management in the city in its entirety, just so that when people see it, it might just help understand that this is just a part of the puzzle.
Anyone like to respond? Is it possible to change the title of that before it goes out for public consultation? It's been proposed that that be in the resolution, and so perhaps Councillor Greer, you're proposing that as an amendment?
I just don't want people to put in thoughts from the community and invest the time in it when it's not actually on the topic that's in the document. So whether it's the title or the purpose or the resolution, where I take advice on where we think that's best, so people don't invest the time in commenting when it's not relevant to their concern.
Just to be clear, what has been tabled for council is to consent to advertising the policy as drafted. if we want to make changes to the policy before it goes out for consultation, then that would need to be captured in the resolution tonight.
So can I suggest, Councillor Greer, it might be something like stormwater drainage connections for new developments, something like that, because to make that clear. And I just want to ask if it was to be amended to that wording, would that serve the purpose of clarity?
Yeah, through the chair, I suppose the policy is for everybody, residents that want to develop. It could also be due to whatever reason that the resident is now experiencing flooding and not developing and wants to connect into the system to get rid of that flooding. I do feel the policy, although I take on board the concerns, I do feel that the policy previously was back in 2013 had that same naming. We have changed it to benefit the city. So the biggest risk to the city is developments connecting into our drainage system, which reduces the capacity of the already undersized system to cope with stormwater. So my advice to council would be, let's go out and consult on the policy, wanting everybody to come back with these questions, which we can answer during that 4-week period during the consultation phase.
Thanks, Mayor. Through the chair, wasn't comfortable in the consultation phase to articulate exactly what this policy is and what it's meant to address and what it's not addressing.
Sorry, I misunderstood. So was that you're not comfortable? You are? I just missed the first part of the sentence.
Sorry, through the chair. Very comfortable to have in the consultation that it articulates exactly what the policy is seeking to achieve and what it's not addressing in that space.
Yep, that's okay by me as long as it's in there very clear in really simple terms that this is what it is and what it isn't. Thank you.
Are there any other comments in relation to this proposal? Okay, Councillor Wallace, did you want to conclude your comments? Okay, I'm going to put the proposal. All those in favour? And that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next proposal is 11.1, financial statements as at the 30th of April. Oh, we do have 9.2. I beg your pardon. Oh, I missed that. Sorry, 9.2, outcome of advertising and adoption of new healthy food and drink policy. Okay, do I have a mover for that? Moved Councillor Wolf. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Greer. So, Councillor Wolf, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really pleased to see this item come forward. I just wanted to make 3 comments. One, I thought it was worth clarifying, as we've done previously, the scope of this policy. So the scope is really around City of Vincent facilities and events. The city, in this case, is not seeking to police private businesses or external events. The second point that I wish to make was just feedback that I had from parents some time ago now, saying that they really welcomed this policy because knowing that there was going to be healthy food options at events and facilities where they'd be taking young children helps with stress in terms of knowing not only that the children are going to be well fed, but also, I guess, knowing that you're not going to have psycho little kids running around full of sugar and very difficult to manage. So that was some of the feedback that we had. But the last point I really wanted to make was around the Cancer Council involvement. We've heard very strongly as a council that people in our community are concerned about exposure to carcinogens and exposure to agents of disease. And there is the expectation from government, and I'll include the city in that we do take a progressive role in protecting our community from carcinogens and disease. So I was really encouraged to see the letter from the Cancer Council giving that option to provide further advice and discussions in the implementation of this policy. And I really encourage administration to take up that option and to continue being quite proactive, working with the Cancer Council and the Department of Health around these issues. So thank you for that.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. And I also just want to welcome and acknowledge the administration's efforts for the new policy. I particularly am very excited that this will be a trigger an instigator for getting a baseline on the provision of healthy food and drink in the city. And I understand that we haven't got that data to date. So I'm looking forward to that and noting that in a future iteration of this policy, I'd really like to see us move towards having some targets informed by that data. So we've got some goals for our community down the track. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments in relation to this policy? Okay, I've got some questions about this. Can I just confirm? So the policy says that it's going to increase provision and promotion of healthy food and drink and reduce provision and promotion of unhealthy food and drink. Can I just confirm that's the same wording that's been there all along? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So the whole point of this policy, for the main things that I can see, is that really what it's trying to do is to basically clamp down on the advertising and promotion of unhealthy fast foods. And as I understand it, lots of parents are saying this is fantastic. Like, if they can take their kids over to Beatty Park and they're not just going to be confronted with like lots of signs from fast food and the like, and they can actually see if they can choose something for their children without having their children effectively choose that's very welcomed. So I'm just going to clarify, because it seems that there's been a little bit of jumping the gun on this, and some people seem to think that we're going to be doing things like banning chips and stuff like that. And from what I understand, not only has this not happened to date under the existing policy, which is exactly the same, but there doesn't seem to be any intention of doing that. It looks to me like this is about increasing choice for people, increasing choice for consumers. Do you have any comments in relation to that?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Zaman. It certainly is. This is the first of the policy, and we're trying to influence positively those environments that we have control over. So we are looking at promotion and marketing and branding and things like that we can reduce visibility of those sort of products where we have that control. We're certainly not looking to influence environments that are beyond our scope at this stage. And yeah, we are not taking away choice. We're merely offering, perhaps in more of a majority, healthier food and drink options, and reducing the promotion and marketing of unhealthy food and drink options.
I think it's really great that you're looking at extending choice for consumers, and that you're not trying to take some sort of nanny state approach to forcing people to have unhealthy food because there are no other options. So I think that's really amazing. So that's very good. It's wonderful that we are at the forefront of providing an increased range of choice for people, and that we're not looking to ban any food, but what we are looking is making sure that people can have an increased choice. So that's really great. I'm really pleased to hear that, and I look forward to being able to take any media correspondence in relation to this now that the policy has actually been passed, and we can actually confirm exactly what it is, because it would be very disappointing if misinformation was being sent to people because perhaps there was not a very good understanding of the way that track changes work when it comes to proposals to amend policies when they come to council. So that's terrific, and I'm really pleased, as I've got to say, as someone who is a mum of 3 and hoping to be a grandmother at some point in the next few years, no pressure kids, to know that I'll be able to take my grandkids to local facilities and not have the endless nagging that comes with young kids who are naturally inclined to want to eat a whole bunch of stuff they shouldn't be eating because they are actually heavily influenced by invidious advertising of junk food companies. Now, does anyone else wish to make any comment in relation to this innovative, progressive, positive, choice-focused proposal? No? Okay. Councillor Wolf, is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion? Okay, so I'll put the proposal. All those in favour? Great. Here's for choice. Okay, so I'm then going to move on to proposal 11.1, financial statements as at the 30th of April 2024. Do I have a mover for this proposal, for these statements? Can I just have a mover? I don't have to speak. Okay, so moved Councillor Wolf, seconded Councillor Castle. Councillor Wolf, do you want to say anything? Councillor Castle, do you want to say anything? I've got a question, if that's okay. So I've just got to get it. So the question I wanted to ask in relation to 11.1, well, there was two questions I've got. It's got 164,378 unfavourable loss on disposal of assets due to timing variances. Could you give a little bit more background to that, please?
Yes, to you, Mayor Xamon. The profit on disposal of assets or loss on disposal of assets is essentially when we replace an asset, we write off the previous asset. So that's predominantly driven by a number of park assets around reticulation and playground equipment, which we've disposed of because we replaced them. This is a non-cash item, so it doesn't affect any rating or surpluses in the budget.
Okay, and the other question I wanted to have was I noted the significant increase in outstanding rates at 4.549% compared to 3.64% for the same period last year. I'm assuming it's because of the increased pressure with cost of living, but my question is, have you had any feedback as to what might be contributing to that increase?
To you, Mayor Xamon. So the rates went out a little bit later last year than the prior year, so that there's a small variation in how many days we've had to collect them relative to the start of the year. There are more people on probably special payments arrangements year on year, so there's probably a small component of cost of living, but it's still a fairly good recoverability rate relative to other local governments. So we're still quite happy and comfortable that there's no significant concerns there with that recoverability so far.
Okay, so I just want to be clear on that then. So with the increase, apart from the timing difference, so with the increase, we do have a commensurate increase in payment plans. So we will be getting those costs. We just don't have that cash flow at the moment. Is that correct?
Yes, to you, Ms. Elman, that's correct. We found that since we had the special payment arrangements year on year, that increases every year. So when the rate smoothing was first introduced a few years ago, we see a continued increase every year. But these are secured charges over the land, so we will eventually get the cash flow. It's just a matter of when we receive it, if they are a bit late.
Are there any other questions in relation to this item? Okay, all those in favour? And it's passed unanimously. Thank you. So we move on to the next one, which is 11.4, adoption of the annual budget 2024-25, noting that an absolute majority is going to be required for this item. Okay, so do we have a mover for the annual budget? Okay, moved Councillor Castle. Do we have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Wolf. Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak to this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm very happy to support the budget this year and note that it is a balanced budget that continues our forward plan to improve the city's financial health, as we've set out in our LTFP, and it includes addressing asset maintenance and building our reserves. I consider that this budget includes a modest rate rise of 4%, and note that Vincent's still, even with this rise, a very low rating council. We've talked about before, this rise represents an increase of only $63 per year on the median residential household. Since last week, we can see the results of the consultation on the rate setting statement, and I'm pleased to note that that indicates support for the differential rates that are proposed this year to increase the vacant residential rate in the dollar by 8%. Note that there's even support for a greater difference from those who responded. I would probably say that although this is a lever that we can pull, I don't believe it's a significant one in terms of moving the construction industry. But what we can do, we do. And I think it's an important message to send to the community and to landowners in Vincent that we do value development and that they're encouraged to play their part in resolving some of our housing issues. I think I note that there's also support in the consultation for higher commercial rates, and there's a bit of commentary on the difference between residential and commercial and how Vincent compares to other local governments in their difference. I think that's something that we could consider for future budgets and perhaps get some information on that for next year, although that would have to be in consultation with businesses and it would have to obviously factor in the number of different pressures that there are on businesses and whether that's actually something that we could feasibly consider. I do think there's more work to be done on consultation in relation to our budget. There was some commentary in the submissions about the difficulty in providing feedback without context, and it's something we discuss every year. My request and suggestion for next year would be that consultation is discussed at the very beginning of the budget process so it can be built into that timeline and into that process. We are often struggling to squeeze it in and struggling to find the best way to actually consult with enough information. But I think that needs to be a priority and it needs to be considered early. Finally, I also would just like to say thank you to Reece and to the team. You've done an absolutely fabulous job this year. It's really encouraging and satisfying to see how smooth our budget process is now, that we managed to integrate and coordinate the LTFP, the CBP, the Capital Works program, everything in the same process. It's certainly that process has increased and improved a lot since my first budget on council. I'm sure Councillor Hallett would agree. So yes, really want to say thank you to the whole administration, but particularly to Reece's team for the massive amount of work they've put into presenting this today, and I'm very happy to commend this budget.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo those comments as well to Reece and team and administration. Thank you so much for all the hard work and the planning that's been involved in moving these documents forward. But especially thank you as well for all of the opportunities that you provided for us as councillors to have input into that process. The proposed 4% increase is below the 5.5% included in our long-term financial plan. Vincent is one of Perth's lowest rating councils. I think from the documentation it was 7th lowest. And it's clear that once again, we've tried to keep these increases as low as possible while still delivering a wide range of really high quality services across the community. It's certainly front of mind that this budget is being delivered within the context of a cost of living crisis. So for people experiencing financial hardship, I do encourage them to access the financial hardship measures available for the next financial year. I do support the relatively high increase of the 8% for vacant residential category properties. I've seen firsthand and heard from residents about the antisocial behaviour and the health and safety issues that we've seen at some of these properties. And these issues don't just cause distress for neighbours and residents, but they require significant resourcing from the city, and that comes at a cost. Properties that are developed and that are lived in, they bring a vibrancy, aesthetic appeal and economic activity into the area, and particularly in a housing crisis. I think this is an appropriate lever for the city to be using. So overall, thank you, and I'm really confident that we are moving ahead with a sound approach to our financial management.
Anyone else want to make any comments? I want to make some comments about this. This is obviously my first budget as mayor, and really pleased that I've been able to incorporate some key things. One of the things that I was also very keen to bring into this council was increased differential rates between vacant properties and properties which are being utilised. As has just been said, vacant properties actually incur a huge cost. There has been a furphy around for a while to say that vacant properties shouldn't have to attract more rates because they don't have basic services like rubbish being provided. That's true. That's because all the rubbish is simply being spilled out onto the streets and remaining all over the property and ending up in neighbours' yards and the like instead. I think that if landholders choose to keep properties vacant, then it's perfectly appropriate, particularly in a housing crisis, to make people pay more for those people who are left to live with the consequences of all this vacant land and vacant houses, but also have to live with the antisocial implications from that as well. I'm hoping that everyone who has vacant property is going to use whatever lever they can to move on that. If they don't have the money to develop, please sell. Do something, but don't just leave it vacant in the middle of the city. What a waste of land, and it really does hamper the vibrancy of our area. I'm not supportive of looking. Well, I suppose it's okay to look at anything, but I'm just flagging that I'm not inclined to look at increasing the amount of rates that commercial businesses necessarily pay. I do think, as I say, vacant commercial properties should be paying huge amounts for rates. But if it's not vacant, and then it's invariably small businesses that are just trying to eke out a living, and we rely on them to give us the vibrancy that makes Vincent so amazing. And I note that they're already incurring costs that over and above, such as having to pay for their own rubbish removal. So there are already additional costs that are being borne by our small businesses. So I think that if we're going to look at that moving forward, these are the sorts of things that we would need to be very mindful of. The final comment I want to make is I am disappointed that Western Power ended up dragging their feet in terms of the tendering process so that we could have rolled out the underground power. We could have continued to roll out underground power in this next financial year, as was always intended. And I know we did our part, and I know we were ready to go. And so it is disappointing that those hold-ups have meant that we've had to delay by an entire 12 months. I think that residents are really waiting for this to happen. They're waiting for it because it's for a lot of reasons, partly because they've already been contributing towards the costs, but also because underground power is going to be significant in terms of helping us to green our city and a whole range of other things as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen, but I think that's something that has been poorly understood, and it's important that people realise that that was not a council choice. It was unfortunately something that was pretty much imposed upon us. Are there any further comments in relation to this budget? Okay, Councillor Castle, do you want to say anything in conclusion? All right, so I'm going to put the proposal needing an absolute majority. All those in favour? Okay, we have an absolute majority because it's passed by consensus. Thank you very much. And so the final item that we need to go to is 12.2, adoption of corporate business plan and 4-year capital works program, and noting that an absolute majority decision is required. Do we have a mover for this proposal? A mover. That would be Councillor Castle. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor LaFontaine. Councillor Castle, is there anything you want to say?
I'll be brief. Thanks again for presenting this as part of the suite of documents that we consider at this time of the year, and very happy to support.
Councillor LaFontaine.
No, thank you, Ms. Simon.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments? I've got a question. Sorry, this is in relation to the Leederville Oval Civic Precinct Master Plan. I note that $50,000 in order to develop that is not actually coming forward until the 27-28 year. I note there's been a fair bit of movement around the Leederville Oval over the course of the last month or so. Is there any chance that will be able to be brought forward in a future? Can it be revised, and considering that it's already changed since these papers got distributed?
Through the chair, the master plan has been temporarily deferred while we are dealing with some of the bigger issues that we need to deal with, but it's not deferred indefinitely. And yes, we will be coming back to a council workshop to talk through how we're approaching some pending capital works upgrades in that space, and we can incorporate discussion on the master plan in that. Yes.
Okay, and my other question was in relation to enhanced data collection for CRV sporting clubs, strategic requirements, collaborate with the urban design and strategic projects team to prioritise requirements. Is this something that's over and above the public open space and sport, the community facilities plan that's currently occurring, or is this something in addition, or is that effectively what it's referring to?
Through the chair. So that is information that will help to feed into the community infrastructure plan.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments in relation to this item? Okay, so Councillor Castle, you want to say anything in conclusion? Okay, I'll put the proposal. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you. So I notice that there are no motions of which previous notice has been given. So there being no further business to conduct, I thank all those in attendance and those who are on the live stream, and close the meeting at 7:48. Thank you. You can stop the live stream.